The Sacred Band of Thebes. It is generally accepted that the Sacred Band of Thebes was created in 379 BC by the Theban leader Gorgidas. The band was created in the context of the revolt against Sparta. Gorgidas probably sought to create a standing unit, which would match the Spartans in cohesion and training, as he anticipated a Spartan campaign to retake Thebes. Gorgidas did not emulate the Spartan example of a full-time citizen army, but picked 300 of Theban's strongest and bravest hoplites to form a so-called sacred band. This unit would consist of 150 couples of men. This is sometimes associated with modern homosexuality, but ancient same-sex relationships were seldom equal and open in nature, and men were not supposed to have anal sex. In the case of the sacred band, the male couple consisted of older erastes and younger eromenos. There was a kind of master-apprentice relationship between them, and the erastes gave the eromenos his armor when he came of age. The prefix sacred should be derived from the sacred oath of mutual assistance before a god. The Theban military institution of Pederasty could be derived from the Spartan one, and its function was probably the same: the bonding of men for increased unit cohesion. The primary loyalty should be with the other men of their unit, not with any sacred commitment in civilian life, like marriage and the family. The initial deployment of the Sacred Band was as a garrison in the Theban citadel of Cadmea. Gorgidas also used it to bolster the phalanx by distributing the men among the front ranks on the battlefield. This is what he did during the standoff against the Spartan army in 378 BC. The Sacred Band and the Theban hoplites braved the advancing Spartan hoplites by standing at ease, an order which was given by the Athenian general Chabrias. Against such cold-bloodedness the Spartans lost the appetite for battle and withdrew. While Gorgidas distributed the sacred band among the front ranks, his successor Pelopidas preferred to deploy it as a single unit. This paid off at the Battle of Tegira in 375 BC. This time the band was almost all by itself and outnumbered by a unit of Spartans. Pelopidas did not flinch and confronted the enemy in dense formation. The Thebans picked off the Spartan leaders, after which the Spartans faltered and opened their ranks. Pelopidas used one of these gaps to flank the Spartans and thoroughly defeat them. It was a resounding victory of the Sacred Band and the first time the Spartans were defeated in pitched battle. The Sacred Band's finest hour was at the Battle of Leuctra in 371 BC. In this large battle, the Thebans were outnumbered by the Spartan army, but succeeded by concentrating their strongest force on the left flank and smashing into the Spartan army's right flank. The Spartan right flank contained the highest number of Spartan citizens and the Spartan king. In this maneuver, the role of the Sacred Band was to act as shock troops in the front, and as a result the Spartan right flank was practically overrun. The death of the Spartan king and most of the Spartan citizens broke the morale of the Spartan army, which consisted mainly of Spartan allies. The creation of the Sacred Band was in hindsight part of an ongoing development in Greek hoplite warfare. The city-state of Argos also had a standing unit of 1,000 men from 420 BC onwards, for example. Thebes followed the example set by Sparta and Argos by concentrating their best hoplites in a dedicated unit. This way the Thebans created a small standing army, which could match the Spartans in training and discipline. The Sacred Band was willing and capable of taking on larger Spartan forces. I would like to thank Roel Konijnendijk of the University of London for his feedback on my script for this episode. Last but not least, I would like to draw your attention to the Ancient Warfare magazine. This is a monthly magazine written by ancient warfare enthusiasts and beautifully illustrated. I highly recommend you take a subscription if you like to know more about ancient warfare.
Was Alexander the Great gay? Good morning, girlfriends, boyfriends, and everyone else in between. So, there are many historical figures whose sexuality has been in question since, well, the beginning of time. And one of those people is Alexander the Great. Just to give you a little time range for this, he was born in 356 BC. At the age of 32, he died in 323 BC. It is possible that people called him great because he was able to destroy the Persian Empire, or maybe it was just because he was a really smart guy. I mean, Aristotle was his professor. Historians and sociologists debate about his sexual orientation all the time. Was he gay? Was he bi? Was he actually straight? And we just make assumptions because of the reputation of the ancient Greeks. Because, believe it or not, homosexuality back then was actually quite common, especially between young boys and older men. They didn't really pay close attention to the gender of the person in the sex act rather than the role that the person played in the sex act. The penetrator role was considered to be more masculine, more dominant, the protector, higher economic status. My finger didn't want to fit in my hole. The passive role was considered to be a role of femininity, lower social economic class, and youth. Well, what do we know about Alexander? Well, we know that he was married twice, but on the other hand, Alexander did not have a son until much later on in life, and people question if his sexuality for women was even there. Plutarch, a Greek historian, wrote about Alexander frequently and his relationship with Roxana and has said that Alexander was infatuated with her, but he found it quite admirable Alexander kept somewhat of a distance between them. Was he just putting the pussy on the pedestal, or was he just not sexually attracted to women? Because the most controversial relationship of his life is the one that he had with his longtime best friend. Which again wasn't very weird because the ancient Greeks believed that a relationship between two men was better than between a man and a woman because they thought that men were superior. All we do know for sure is that he was his best friend and his bodyguard, which sounds a little bit gay to me. But even if he wasn't gay, there were plenty of LGBT people even back then, and if you want to hear about that, I would love to do more LGBT history videos for you guys. Make sure you go and click the like button to let me know you want to see them. I'm really getting into it, to be honest. I have a ton of books next to me. And as always, you can go and ask us any questions that you have over on Rainbow University about being gay or about life or about anything. And if you can, please donate because we are a not-for-profit organization and every little bit helps. I will see you guys back here on Monday with a brand new video. Until then, look inside and to the moon. I love you. Bye!
Iridescent-throned Aphrodite, deathless child of Zeus, wile-weaver, I now implore you, don't, I beg you, lady with pains and torments, crush down my spirit. The Greek poetess Sappho was a passionate soul, and nobody worshipped women as much as she, and that's why her life and work have been discussed for centuries, with particular attention paid to her sexuality. Kalimera, fellow poets. My name's Guy, and welcome to It's History. Today's meeting is on the Mediterranean island of Lesbos. I'll get straight to the point. When we're talking about Sappho, we know very little for certain. There is some information about her life and work, but the problem is that all of this was only recorded in later legends. Sappho holds the title of the most important female lyricist of the classical age. She probably came from an old aristocratic family and lived sometime between 630 and 570 BC on the island of Lesbos in the South Aegean. In her youth, she learned to play the lyre, similar in appearance to a small harp and a common instrument in antiquity. She also composed songs. We presume that she was married and that her husband died at some point. She might have had a daughter. You'll notice that these are far from hard facts. Lesbos was in those days a cultural centre, and life there was very liberal. Women were highly prized and esteemed. Sappho could probably live as she wanted. She moved in a circle of girls and young women. Modern commentators suggest she was a teacher, but there is no proof for this. The women could have been friends, pupils or members of a cult honouring Aphrodite, the goddess of love. Even in ancient times, the wildest rumours circulated about Sappho's life, work and sexual orientation. She was, by all accounts, petite and dark, with an insatiable appetite for sex. The philosopher and poet Plato, on the other hand, described her rather more ambiguously, as beautiful. Sappho was something of a poster girl. Even during her lifetime, she commanded a lot of attention. So was Sappho as horrible as the night, or as beautiful as Aphrodite? We'll never know, but everyone agreed back then on one thing for sure. She was one lyrical lady. People built statues in her honour, and Plato called her the 10th muse. Aristoteles reported that Sappho was revered, quote, although she was a woman. And centuries later, in 1798, the German writer Friedrich Schlegel mused, if we had the complete works of Sappho, it is quite possible that we would never recall Homer. Sappho's poetry was exceptional. Her work included religious hymns, wedding songs and love songs. These were collected in 9 books and were regarded as part of the great canon of antiquity. Sappho's poetry has the status of high art and served as an inspiration to other poets. Most celebrated was Sappho's expressive power and clear language. The poetess even developed a completely new lyrical metre, the Sapphic stanza, which was adopted by other poets. It's hard to believe that only 200 fragments of Sappho's poetry remain, an estimated 700th of her complete works. A pathetic 4 poems have been reconstructed to this day. To achieve this, researchers evaluated references and quotes from other authors and analysed fragments of papyri. The last poem was discovered in 2014 and caused a mild sensation. It was named Poem for a Brother, as it addresses Sappho's brother. Much more exciting than any brother, however, are the women to whom Sappho sings in her poems, and whose beauty she celebrates. Her words ooze intimacy and passion. It might seem that a woman who writes to another woman, I burn and desire, I burn away for you, is a clear-cut lesbian, but it's not that simple. The only contemporary source on Sappho's life is her poems. Most modern academics advise against reading her writings autobiographically. It might well be that Sappho's poems were intended to be read out loud to an audience that could have been entirely male. Perhaps she wrote about a range of topics, but only the fragments regarding the women remain. Sappho's sexual orientation is anything but clear. There is even the legend that as a result of unrequited love with a ferryman, she jumped from a cliff. It's probable, though, that this story was an invention to present Sappho as heterosexual. Truth be told, she was older when she died. We know that because in one of her poems, she complains of greying hair and creaky knees. Whether she was homosexual or not, the term lesbian dates back to Sappho's erotic poetry. The expression doing it like the ladies of Lesbos actually had nothing to do with homosexuality back in ancient times. No, the Greeks used the expression solely to refer to blowjobs, which was something the inhabitants of Lesbos quite clearly could get their heads around. The first clear link between female homosexuality and the island of Lesbos comes from around the 2nd century AD. In the 17th century France, the labels lesbian and sapphist turned up for the first time, and in 1787, a German lexicographer mentioned lesbian love. By the mid-19th century, dictionaries included the term too. Whether Sappho was a lesbian is neither here nor there. We know that in later Greek history, her poetry was frowned upon. Expressing sensations with the passion and commitment of Sappho was seen as immoral. But it wasn't just the later Greeks who had problems with Sappho's poetry. The early church banned it too. One theologian wrote that Sappho was a sex-hungry whore, singing about her own sluttishness. In the Victorian age, it was all the rage to portray Sappho as the leader of a sort of seminary. These were all attempts to find an innocent explanation for Sappho's preference for young women. Lesbos is a particular hotspot for lesbian women today, and for all those who want to be open about their sexuality. The inhabitants of Lesbos are not entirely happy about this. In 2008, some of them even instituted proceedings against Greece's homosexual community. They wanted to prevent them from using the term lesbian in their name, saying that the inhabitants of the island were the only permissible lesbians, and that the sense of the word had nothing to do with sexual orientation. The proceedings were thrown out, and we will probably never again think of this Greek island in the Aegean when we hear the word lesbian spoken in public. But if you want to learn more about Greece's sexual backstory, click up here to see our video on sex in antiquity. And if you're interested in what Sappho's poetry is all about, be sure to check out our Facebook page, where we've posted one of her poems. What do you think? Is Sappho's lesbian legacy as important as some people say? And should the inhabitants of Lesbos have the right to free their home from homosexuality? Leave your comments and questions in the section below, and don't forget to subscribe to It's History for more where this came from. My name's Guy, thanks for popping by, and see you next time.
In classical antiquity, writers such as Herodotus, Plato, Xenophon, Athenaeus and many others explored aspects of homosexuality in ancient Greece. The most widespread and socially significant form of same-sex sexual relations in ancient Greece was between adult men and pubescent or adolescent boys, known as pederasty. Marriages in ancient Greece between men and women were also age-structured, with men in their 30s commonly taking wives in their early teens. Though sexual relationships between adult men did exist, at least one member of each of these relationships flouted social conventions by assuming a passive sexual role. It is unclear how such relations between women were regarded in the general society, but examples do exist as far back as the time of Sappho. The ancient Greeks did not conceive of sexual orientation as a social identifier as modern Western societies have done. Greek society did not distinguish sexual desire or behavior by the gender of the participants, but rather by the role that each participant played in the sex act, that of active penetrator or passive penetrated. This active-passive polarization corresponded with dominant and submissive social roles. The active penetrative role was associated with masculinity, higher social status, and adulthood, while the passive role was associated with femininity, lower social status, and youth. Topic: Pederasty. The most common form of same-sex relationships between males in Greece was pederastia. Pederasty meaning boy love. It was a relationship between an older male and an adolescent youth. A boy was considered a boy until he was able to grow a full beard. In Athens the older man was called erastes. He was to educate, protect, love, and provide a role model for his eromenos, whose reward for him lay in his beauty, youth, and promise. The roots of Greek pederasty lie in the tribal past of Greece, before the rise of the city-state as a unit of political organization. These tribal communities were organized according to age groups. When it came time for a boy to embrace the age group of the adult and to become a man, he would leave the tribe in the company of an older man for a period of time that constituted a rite of passage. This older man would educate the youth in the ways of Greek life and the responsibilities of adulthood. The rite of passage undergone by Greek youths in the tribal prehistory of Greece evolved into the commonly known form of Greek pederasty after the rise of the city-state, or polis. Greek boys no longer left the confines of the community, but rather paired up with older men within the confines of the city. These men, like their earlier counterparts, played an educational and instructive role in the lives of their young companions. Likewise, just as in earlier times, they shared a sexual relationship with their boys. Penetrative sex, however, was seen as demeaning for the passive partner, and outside the socially accepted norm. In ancient Greece, sex was generally understood in terms of penetration, pleasure, and dominance, rather than a matter of the sexes of the participants. For this reason, pederasty was not considered to be a homosexual act, given that the man would be taking on a dominant role, and his disciple would be taking on a passive one. When intercourse occurred between two people of the same gender, it still wasn't entirely regarded as a homosexual union, given that one partner would have to take on a passive role, and would therefore no longer be considered a man in terms of the sexual union. An elaborate social code governed the mechanics of Greek pederasty. It was the duty of the adult man to court the boy who struck his fancy, and it was viewed as socially appropriate for the younger man to withhold for a while before capitulating to his mentor's desires. This waiting period allowed the boy to ensure that his suitor was not merely interested in him for sexual purposes, but felt a genuine emotional affection for him and was interested in assuming the mentor role assigned to him in the pederastic paradigm. The age limit for pederasty in ancient Greece seems to encompass, at the minimum end, boys of 12 years of age. To love a boy below the age of 12 was considered inappropriate, but no evidence exists of any legal penalties attached to this sort of practice. Traditionally, a pederastic relationship could continue until the widespread growth of the boy's body hair, when he is considered a man. Thus, the age limit for the younger member of a pederastic relationship seems to have extended from 12 to about 17 years of age. The ancient Greeks, in the context of the pederastic city-states, were the first to describe, study, systematize, and establish pederasty as a social and educational institution. It was an important element in civil life, the military, philosophy, and the arts. There is some debate among scholars about whether pederasty was widespread in all social classes, or largely limited to the aristocracy. In the military. The Sacred Band of Thebes, a separate military unit reserved only for men and their beloved, is usually considered the prime example of how the ancient Greeks used love between soldiers in a troop to boost their fighting spirit. The Thebans attributed to the Sacred Band the power of Thebes for the generation before its fall to Philip II of Macedon, who was so impressed with their bravery during battle, he erected a monument that still stands today on their gravesite. He also gave a harsh criticism of the Spartan views of the band. "Perish miserably they who think that these men did or suffered aught disgraceful." Pamens's opinion, according to Plutarch, was that Homer's Nestor was not well skilled in ordering an army when he advised the Greeks to rank tribe and tribe. He should have joined lovers and their beloved. For men of the same tribe little value one another when dangers press, but a band cemented by friendship grounded upon love is never to be broken. These bonds, reflected in episodes from Greek mythology, such as the heroic relationship between Achilles and Patroclus in the Iliad, were thought to boost morale as well as bravery due to the want to impress and protect their lover. Such relationships were documented by many Greek historians and in philosophical discourses, as well as in offhand remarks such as Philip II of Macedon's recorded by Plutarch demonstrates. It is not only the most warlike peoples, the Boeotians, Spartans, and Cretans, who are the most susceptible to this kind of love but also the greatest heroes of old, Meleager, Achilles, Aristomenes, Cimon, and Epaminondas. During the Lelantine War between the Eretrians and the Chalcidians, before a decisive battle the Chalcidians called for the aid of a warrior named Cleomachus, glorious warrior. He answered their request, bringing his lover to watch. Leading the charge against the Eretrians he brought the Chalcidians to victory at the cost of his own life. The Chalcidians erected a tomb for him in the marketplace in gratitude. It is said that one of the most noble things is to give one's own life to save their lover. Although this did not occur during the Lelantine War example, it was still a heroic act for Cleomachus and even a perfect time to show his lover his selfless ways. Gender representations in Greek theatre. The gender representations in Greek theatre was that of the stereotypical roles within ancient Greece. Men were sought to be manipulative, powerful, had control over their own free will, and control over their surroundings. Women were expected to be contained to the house and to do all the housework. They were also expected to produce offspring and act modestly. In the play, The Bacchae, the gender roles becomes evident in how the characters within the play are written and perceived. The women, or better known in the play as the Bacchae, are manipulated by the god named Dionysus. Dionysus is a strong and witty male character within the play and is written to easily manipulate the women due to this. In the same play, when the women start to gain control over themselves, they are perceived to be wild and loose. The Greek men viewed the women in this state with both fear and anxiety. Love between adult men. Given the importance in Greek society of cultivating the masculinity of the adult male and the perceived feminizing effect of being the passive partner, relations between adult men of comparable social status were considered highly problematic, and usually associated with social stigma. This stigma, however, was reserved for only the passive partner in the relationship. According to contemporary opinion, Greek males who engaged in passive anal sex after reaching the age of manhood, at which point they were expected to take the reverse role in pederastic relationships and become the active and dominant member, thereby were feminized or made a woman of themselves. There is ample evidence in the theatre of Aristophanes that derides these passive men and gives a glimpse of the type of biting social opprobrium and shame, atimia, heaped upon them by their society. Regardless of the opprobrium, homosexual behavior was common among men of all classes despite the protocols and conventions surrounding it. Hubbard, Op. Cit. p. 7. Achilles and Patroclus. The first recorded appearance of a deep emotional bond between adult men in ancient Greek culture was in the Iliad 800 BC. Homer does not depict the relationship between Achilles and Patroclus as sexual. The ancient Greeks emphasized the supposed age difference between the two by portraying Patroclus with a beard in paintings and pottery, while Achilles is cleansehaven, although Achilles was an almost godlike figure in Greek society. This led to a disagreement on whom to make the erastes and whom the eromenos, since the Homeric tradition made Patroclus out to be older but Achilles stronger. Other ancients held that Achilles and Patroclus were simply close friends. Aeschylus in the tragedy Myrmidons made Achilles the protector since he had avenged his lover's death even though the gods told him it would cost his own life. However, the character of Phaedrus in Plato's Symposium asserts that Homer emphasized the beauty of Achilles, which would qualify him, not Patroclus, as eromenos. Sapphic love. Sappho, a poet from the island of Lesbos, wrote many love poems addressed to women and girls. The love in these poems is sometimes requited, and sometimes not. Sappho is thought to have written close to 12,000 lines of poetry on her love for other women. Of these, only about 600 lines have survived. As a result of her fame in antiquity, she and her land have become emblematic of love between women. In addition to being a poet, Sappho was the head of what was known as a thyasos. Thiasoi were communities of women in which Greek women could receive a limited form of education. Critically, however, girls in these communities also experienced same-sex love, sometimes for their mistresses. Sappho writes of her love for various students of hers and sometimes for each other. As the polis evolved, however, marriage came to be an integral instrument for the organization of the culture, and women were confined to their houses. The thiasoi were no more. Girls were taught from their infancies that it was their duty and destiny in life to give their love to the men who would one day be their husbands. Female-female love had no place within the constraints of this new social organization. Pedagogic erotic relationships are also documented for Sparta, together with athletic nudity for women. Plato's Symposium mentions women who do not care for men, but have female attachments. In general, however, the historical record of love and sexual relations between women is sparse. Scholarship and controversy. After a long hiatus marked by censorship of homosexual themes, modern historians picked up the thread, starting with Eric Beda in 1907 and continuing with K. J. Dover and many others. These scholars have shown that same-sex relations were openly practiced, largely with official sanction, in many areas of life from the 7th century BC until the Roman era. Some scholars believe that same-sex relationships, especially pederasty, were common only among the aristocracy, and that such relationships were not widely practiced by the common people demos. One such scholar is Bruce Thornton, who argues that insults directed at pederastic males in the comedies of Aristophanes show the common people's dislike for the practice. Other scholars, such as Victoria Wohl, emphasize that in Athens, same-sex desire was part of the sexual ideology of the democracy, shared by the elite and the demos, as exemplified by the tyrant slayers, Harmodius and Aristogeiton. Even those who argue that pederasty was limited to the upper classes generally concede that it was part of the social structure of the polis. Considerable controversy has engaged the scholarly world concerning the nature of same-sex relationships among the ancient Greeks described by Thomas Hubbard in the Introduction to Homosexuality in Greece and Rome, A Source Book of Basic Documents, 2007, p. 2. The field of gay studies has, virtually since its inception, been divided between essentialists, those who believe in an archetypical pattern of same-gender attraction that is universal, transhistorical, and transcultural, and social constructionists. Those who hold that patterns of sexual preference manifest themselves with different significance in different societies and that no essential identity exists between practitioners of same-gender love in, for instance, ancient Greece and post-industrial Western society. Some social constructionists have even gone so far as to deny that sexual preference was a significant category for the ancients or that any kind of subculture based on sexual object choice existed in the ancient world. p. 2. He cites Halperin and Foucault in the social constructionist camp and Boswell and Thorpe in the essentialist, cf. E. Stein for a collection of essays, Forms of Desire, Sexual Orientation and the Social Constructionist Controversy, 1992. Hubbard states that, "Close examination of a range of ancient texts suggests, however, that some forms of sexual preference were, in fact, considered a distinguishing characteristic of individuals. Many texts even see such preferences as inborn qualities and as essential aspects of human identity." Ibid. Hubbard utilizes both schools of thought when these seem pertinent to the ancient texts, pp. 2–20. During Plato's time there were some people who had the audacity to say that homosexual sex was shameful in any circumstances. Indeed, Plato himself eventually came to hold this view. At one time he had written that same-sex lovers were far more blessed than ordinary mortals. He even gave them a head start in the great race to get back to heaven, their mutual love refeathering their mottled wings. Now he seemed to contradict himself. In his Ideal City, he says in his last, posthumously published work known as The Laws, homosexual sex will be treated the same way as incest. It is something contrary to nature, he insists, and although there won't be laws against it, nevertheless a propaganda program will encourage everyone to say that it is utterly unholy, odious to the gods and ugliest of ugly things. The subject has caused controversy in most of modern Greece. In 2002, a conference on Alexander the Great was stormed as a paper about his homosexuality was about to be presented. When the film Alexander, which depicted Alexander as romantically involved with both men and women, was released in 2004, 25 Greek lawyers threatened to sue the film's makers, but relented after attending an advance screening of the film. See also: Greek love, homosexuality in ancient Rome, homosexuality in the militaries of ancient Greece, LGBT rights in Greece, Malakia, the Sacred Band of Stepsons. Notes. Literature. Andrew Kalamach, Lovers' Legends, The Gay Greek Myths, New Rochelle, Heidick Press, 2002, ISBN 978-0-9714686-0-3. Cohen, David. Law, Sexuality, and Society, The Enforcement of Morals in Classical Athens. Cambridge University Press, 2004. ISBN 0-521-46642-3. Lalure, Suzanne, Le Couple 1963, Paris, Grasset, translated as Aspects of Love in Western Society in 1965, with a foreword by Jonathan Griffin, New York, McGraw-Hill, LC 65-19851. Dover, Kenneth J. Greek Homosexuality. Vintage Books, 1978. ISBN 0-394-74224-9. Halperin, David. 100 Years of Homosexuality, and Other Essays on Greek Love. Routledge, 1989. ISBN 0-415-90097-2. Hornblower, Simon and Spofforth, Anthony, eds. The Oxford Classical Dictionary, 3rd edition. Oxford University Press, 1996. ISBN 0-19866172-X. Hubbard, Thomas K. Homosexuality in Greece and Rome, University of California Press, 2003. 1 ISBN 0-520-23430-8. Percy, 3, William A. Pederasty and Pedagogy in Archaic Greece. University of Illinois Press, 1996. ISBN 0-252-02209-2. Thornton, Bruce S. Eros, The Myth of Ancient Greek Sexuality. Westview Press, 1997. ISBN 0-8133-3226-5. Wohl, Victoria. Love Among the Ruins, The Erotics of Democracy in Classical Athens. Princeton University Press, 2002. ISBN 0-691-09522-1. External links. Pederasty and pedagogy in Archaic Greece. Ancient Greek homosexuality. Generally speaking, sexuality in ancient Athens was well recorded. These ancient artifacts tell the entire story in pictures.